Hi everyone, this is Joe.
And this is Yasmin, and we are organizational psychology and management consultants.
Welcome to Peak Performance. This is where we talk about latest research in psychology and management and connect them to solve real-world problems. Our podcasts are where we discuss or explore ways where individuals, organizations, where we help them bring them to their natural best.
Yeah, so in today's episode, it's the first of 3 parts. We're very excited.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about a problem that the World Health Organization classified as an organizational phenomenon. So it's the idea of burnout.
In today's episode, we have Yasmin Gonzalez, co-founder of Peak Performance Consulting Group. She has a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology, and she will be talking about why burnout is primarily an organizational problem.
Okay, so Joe, I'm actually really excited that we're kicking off our series on burnout because in terms of scale, so Gallup did the survey and they found out that 8 in 10 people experience burnout.
Wow.
Yes, so and 28% actually experience burnout on the daily. So regularly, they feel very extremely burnt out.
So,
yes.
I mean, those are I think alarming numbers.
Yeah.
You know, 8 out of 10, and I think burnout might be a term that's loosely used. You know, sometimes I hear it from people or from friends. People in corporate world, I feel burnt out. So how do we really define burnout?
Right.
What is burnout?
Yeah, so we do hear it a lot, and some people say that, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so stressed, and they feel like that's being burnt out.
Yes.
It's not. So when I'm talking about the definition or I'm talking about drawing on the research, it's really from Christina Maslach, who did a study on burnout, and she defines burnout as a gradual feeling of loss, wherein the gap between the person's needs and the demands of the job is growing greater and greater. So for instance, there are some things that as individual employees and as human beings we need. The need for autonomy, the need for work-life balance. You know, if you have small kids and you're working 16-hour days, of course. Correct, yes. So it's that feeling that the job is so demanding. Maybe workload is increasing and increasing. Maybe my manager is a micromanager. It's curtailing my autonomy. So it's that, and it's on a consistent basis. Okay, and burnout has 3 characteristics, right? So one is it's the feeling of intense emotional exhaustion.
Wow.
Intense emotional exhaustion. So before I was talking to one executive, and he likened what he was feeling about his job. He likened it to like every day he wakes up and he feels like he needs to take a dip in boiling water.
Oh my goodness.
Like going to work.
Water.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
yes. So it's really intense. Like you're dreading going to work, not just the regular Monday blues, but on the daily, right? And secondly, it's characterized by extreme distrust of people. Like you feel like your boss, your coworker, your subordinates, they're just after their own interest.
All right.
Yeah. And the third characteristic of burnout is that you do the very minimal just not to get fired. So you see an extreme dip in terms of job efficacy.
Yeah.
All right. And right now there's a TikTok trend, the whole quiet quitting. I'm quiet quitting. I don't like that term because that term has so many definitions.
Yes, I agree,
but some people, when they say that they're just doing the very minimal not to get fired, they define that as quiet quitting. So those are the 3 main characteristics.
So it's that intense feeling of exhaustion,
Correct.
Mistrust, right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
and you're just doing the very bare minimum,
Exactly.
just not to get fired. Is that
Exactly.
correct? Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Wow. So with this definition, how is it an organizational problem?
Right. So the World Health Organization classified it not as a mental health problem, like individually, but more of an organizational problem, right? Because before companies would be like, oh, that employee is burnt out, they're probably not resilient, or they're probably slacking off. But that's why the WHO had to say, no, it's not an individual problem. It's a company problem. Why? Because so many things, the components, the causes of burnout, it's not on the individual's control. So for things like work design, for instance, like you start off the job and you have your KPIs, your key performance indicators, you have, your boss tells you your roles and responsibilities, and then you start in the job and it's so much more different, right? Or for instance, company culture. If a company has a shame culture wherein you make a mistake, and then you get penalized for it, how can the person individually have control over that, right? So that's the reason why it really needs to be addressed as an organization. So I'll give you an example. Before I was working in digital marketing, and I was pitching to the CEO of a conglomerate here in the Philippines, and they do real estate, they sell musical instruments, so a couple of other businesses. And I was pitching a digital marketing campaign, and he was like, okay, he got his lieutenants, his man-comm to join the meeting. I noticed off the bat, everybody just looked down at their notes with a pen. Like they wouldn't make eye contact with the CEO nor to me. And I was like, this is really strange. Usually with man-comm, they have questions. And then I found out why. Because it was just the CEO talking, and then right there was one time when he asked the question. He asked, I don't know, the head of sales a question. It took the guy a couple of minutes to answer, and he was asking for like the latest sales or latest numbers of something. It took him a while to answer, and the CEO was like, why don't you know this? Aren't you are you stupid? Right? In front of
the entire group.
Correct.
In front of you,
exactly. And you can tell that there was a shame culture. And for cultures to change, you need leadership. You need it's a process, it's not just an individual doing it. So that's why it's an organizational problem, and it needs to be addressed at that level.
I think that's one of my major learnings from today is that the World Health Organization didn't classify it as a mental health issue, because I thought like burnout had something to do with the individual, but it really is an organizational problem.
Yeah, I mean it certainly affects the individual because then you're feeling chronic stress, you're getting sick, you don't want to go to work. But in terms of how it can be addressed, I think the WHO did that so that companies can wake up and be like, okay, we need to fix this as an organization. Not like send your employees just to a stress management workshop and be like, okay, like let's get back to work.
Yeah, it's not like a one-time solution. It has to be like, over a certain period of time, overhaul, like the culture also has to evolve.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that, as you've explained how this is, an organizational problem, how much do you think this is costing companies?
Okay, in terms of the costs, in terms of monetary costs. In terms of the cost, it really boils down to attrition and dip in performance. So just to let you know some statistics around it. So burnout employees usually are 2.6 times more likely to look for other job opportunities.
Wow.
Okay, than a person who's satisfied with their job, right? And at the same time, 63% of burnout employees are more likely to take sick leaves. So you're also it's also costing you in terms of insurance, right? And 23% of burnout employees are more likely to go to the emergency room because of stress-related, burnout-related problems, right? So, and in terms of monetary cost, if we think about it, to replace a rank and file lower to mid-management, it's costing a company around 33% of that employee's annual salary. So that's very conservative because if you're talking about upper management, C-level, etc., of course it's going to be much more than that. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And you can't even really measure dip in productivity, so that's also an added cost to burnout. So it really does need to be addressed. And that's also one of the things that we want to do in this podcast.
So would you say that if your attrition is high in the company, like is that a factor? Like is that like a sign that burnout could be one of the issues?
Right.
Or-
Attrition can be caused by a lot of things. I mean, it also can be a cost of because low motivation does not automatically equate to burnout. We will need to measure it. So there's a way to measure
Yeah.
how much is the cost, how much is burnout really
Yeah.
happening in the organization. There's a way to measure that. So that's something that can be done to see if it's really a burnout problem,
Yes.
if it's an issue of that. But usually you would know if it's if there's a culture wherein there's no psychological safety. So psychological safety is the feeling that I can voice out my concerns, I can talk to the team, I can talk to my boss without being penalized for it. So if there's no psychological safety, if there are, in a way, biases in the organization, like for example, there's a big gender pay gap, or you're treating women and men differently, if there's a values issue, lots of things which we will talk about in succeeding podcasts. Yes, so at least companies can have an idea if this is something that they'd want to look into.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so in the next 2 parts of the series, we're going to talk about, in part 2, we're going to talk about the 6 major causes of burnout. And in part 3, we're going to talk about solutions. So what leaders in companies can do to really solve and address this problem.
So Peak Performance is hosted by us, Joe and Daya and Yasmin Gonzalez. If you have any questions, concerns, feedback, or if you need help bringing your team and your leaders to their peak performance, send us an email. My email is joanne@peakperformance-consulting.com or yasmin@peakperformance-consulting.com. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.